So look, I have about 20 minutes to talk about a whole bunch of stuff, and I wouldn't be Canadian if I didn't start talking by thanking people. And I think I spent a lot of time, for those of you who know me, outside of this city, and I spent a lot of time in the States, particularly in LA and Silicon Valley, and it amazes me all the time when I come home about what an amazing community we have here, and the number of hours that I spend in boardrooms in the Valley thinking about just how inconsequential they are in comparison to the work that actually goes on here. We should be amazingly proud of not only what we've accomplished as a technology community, but where we're going, and you guys really are the future of that. And I think it's time for us to stop looking south all the time and pay a little bit more attention to what's going on here, because we really are. It's true. This is the most competitive technology environment in North America, in my opinion. And we'll see more of that in the next few years. And I want to thank the deans and everyone at BCIC for giving me a chance to actually talk to you and give you a sense of some thoughts of someone who's a bit of a lunatic in the community here about where I think we're going. And on that note, if we can cue up the slides, what I want to talk about a little bit is the next 730 days. So, in my world, boards love to talk about five-year plans. Five-year plans are a slight bit of a waste of time in this economy. I think you probably only have visibility into the next 730 days, maybe the next 365. So I want to look at what is life going to be like as an entrepreneur over the next 730 days. And I think what's interesting is where we stand as human beings. So we are at this great fork in the road for humanity. That is an actual fork in the road, I know. And there are actually four prongs. So what's interesting is not where we've been, but if you stand right now and think about what is going on to us and around us, it's rather shocking. So on the one hand, you have incredible technological change. Change that we talked about 7 years ago, the grandeur of the web, the grandeur of mobile, that quietly came and has seen more behavioral change in a decade than at any other point in human history. Then you have a second rung in that road, which is demography. And between the growth of Gen Y and the millennials and the rising of the baby boom, we have an era of demographics that we have never seen before in human history. Then you have environmental challenges and change, facing what we have done to the planet and understanding how we are actually going to get ourselves out of the mess that we have created. And the fourth, recent in the last year, is this financial fork in the road. Suddenly, the very institutions that we created to protect us financially are the very things that we are afraid of. It was the first time in Canadian history, by the way, if you talk to the Canadian Bankers Association, they will tell you it was the first time that they had to field phone calls from Canadians who were concerned that they would not have their money returned to them and that they had their $100,000 coverage to cover their deposits. Actually had to hire an individual to take all the phone calls that was coming through. And you stand at this fork in the road and you realize this is a really freaky time to be alive. And if you think about what that means, forget about business and forget about where we're going and just think about your life as a human being, it's pretty challenging. So what I want to talk about in the next 20 minutes is one very important thing, which is the foundational shifts that have happened underneath us. There are many people, many historians who argue that you can predict your future based on your past. I would argue that we are going forward in an era that will no longer be the case. And there are three major foundational shifts that have occurred that may make it possible that we will predict our pattern, but not likely and probably not going to happen, that we will repeat our history. I want to talk a little bit about entrepreneurs and the DNA of entrepreneurs and what it means to be an entrepreneur. Talk a little bit about dough and getting money, and try to give you a little bit of insight about what you need to know over the next 730 days that's going to affect you as an entrepreneur. Now, I have an ongoing debate with certain folks in the media community about our history and whether we are going to be able to predict our future based on our past. And I would argue that there are three foundational shifts. There are more, but three important ones that we have never seen before historically. And the first has to do with time. Now, time, a second, an hour, is a human construct. We created it. But what happens within that construct is shrinking. If you talk to anyone who is a physicist or an astrophysicist, which unfortunately I spend time doing, but if you do spend that time, you'll realize that everything in humanity that requires a cycle has shrunk. You can take a look at, we even have a term for it now, we call it internet time, but in fact, it's just a quantum of time we've created to account for that shrinkage of time. Now, think about everything from a natural cycle, a stock market, a real estate market, to the education of a 13-year-old child. All of those cycles have shrunk. If you look at stock markets, the first market crash that really happened was in the late 1860s, the tulip bubble in Holland. The next great market crash came some 60 years later. Today, the last market crash prior to the one last year was in 2000. The next in 2008. You can almost guarantee the next one will be less than 8 years away. It is shrinking. Same with real estate cycles. Same with the education of a 13-year-old. It is undeniable that a 13-year-old today is just way smarter than we were when we were 13. My little cousin came to visit me. I tell this story all the time. He came to visit me in Vancouver, walks off the plane. He's got a knapsack with him and a book in it, Thomas Friedman's Hot, Flat, and Crowded. He's 13. And I said, "Is that yours?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "You're reading it?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Why?" And he said, and this was his answer, "Because I'm concerned about the globalization of our economy and the effect on my future." It's like, when I was 13, I put peanut butter in our neighbor's dog's mouth because it looked like he talked. I was that stupid. Time is shrinking, and we need to be very conscious and aware that as the Earth rotates and as this unit of time shrinks beneath us, we will be under incredible pressure to get things done. The second major foundational shift is access. So Tom Standage from The Economist, who I speak at conferences with a lot and we constantly fight with one another, Tom's the business editor of The Economist, who wrote a book called The Victorian Internet. And the premise was that everything we talked about in the web was exactly the same problem that happened in the Victorian era, where everyone was panicked about the telegraph. It was going to change our world, and everyone talked about grandeur, and of course nothing happened. He also points out, by the way, that they were very concerned about the invention of the sofa, because parents were concerned that their children would be sitting on sofas and reading instead of out playing. So Tom believes very wholeheartedly that we are going to go and repeat ourselves again and again. The difference, of course, between now and the Victorian era is we have never been at a point in human history where every human being, and I mean every human being on the planet, is connected within the click of a button. And what does that do to change us and our behaviors? We are virtually unrecognizable as human beings. If you really think about our behaviors, we are split between a duality of virtual and physical self, whether you like to admit it or not, because we are one click away from one another. And this foundation has never existed in humanity before. All other media revolutions were about one-to-one or one-to-many. This is the first time historically where we've had a many-to-many product that allows the insane to take over the asylum, effectively. And the third change is this. What you are looking at is a brain scan of a Gen Xer, somebody my age, and a Gen Y or millennial. I don't actually know the exact age of the other candidate. The thing we need to be very aware of is Gen Y and the millennials are hugely significant. For those of you who have kids in that era, you will know they are virtually aliens compared to the rest of us. Don't read, function, write, socialize the way we do, but the kicker is they are 3 times the size. When you add the Gen Ys and millennials together, they are 3 times the size of the baby boom. And what you are looking at is their superior mind. Because this generation was basically raised with devices in their hand, their ability to multitask and multi-channel is at a rate that we have not seen historically before. And early science, which is starting to come through, this was a study done at Stanford, is showing that when you show data, this was a video, a Jay-Z video actually, believe it or not, was shown to 2 age demographics, the heat map on the brain of the Gen Y millennial was significantly greater. And this is an era where we will have to change how we interact with this era and with these groups because they do not function the same way that we do. And if you think about what the baby boom did